Welcome back to the Let's Build a Willys Jeep channel. We are almost ready to install the transmission. First, there's a few steps we have to do to get it all mounted onto the cross member and get the emergency brake installed. And look outside, look how nice it is out there. Like, I mean, who just want to go for a Jeep ride right now? And it's just sitting in here all sad. Let's get this thing ready to go. Taking you guys over to the transmission and transfer case workstation for now as we get the emergency brake installed. So the first thing we have to do is to release this nut because the backing plate installs onto these 4 bolts right here around here that are attached to the transfer case, and then this will be attached to the emergency brake drum. So to get this nut off, it is a 1.1/8" socket, so it's pretty big. Use a breaker bar and we'll put this on the nut. We want to make sure the transfer case is engaged, or in other words, in 4-wheel drive. So when you spin the rear here, the front spins as well, and this will help us in taking this nut off. So I'll just use the universal U joint right here and put it on to the end right here like that. Thread the nuts on. Like that, and with those nuts threaded on, that will help us use a big crowbar right here, and we'll wedge the crowbar into this U-joint right here. Just stick it in like that. And now when you unloosen it, so when you're unloosening it, it'll spin this thing this direction, which will see it'll put pressure down onto this crowbar like that. So when you unloosen this now, all you have to do is just stand on the crowbar and this nut will come off very easily. So with the socket in the unloosening position, just put it on the socket, stand on the crowbar, kind of hold the transmission down at the same time, and then give it a good push and the nut will come unloose now. Just like that, and the nut has come off. Now we can pull this rear flange off and we can install the backing plate. Behind the 1.1/8" nut, there is a washer, so that has to come out next. And now we can pull off this rear flange off, and then that will allow access to put the backing plate for the emergency brake on. We are now going to try get this rear flange off, but it's not that easy to get off. First, you could try use a rubber mallet to try pound it off. You can see it's pretty stuck on there. So you have to use a puller. So to get yourself a 4-inch gear puller, and that works very well. Just set it up so it will pull this right off, and there's a little indent right there, so the puller sits in there very easily. I would just set it up with the only 2 pullers on it, because at an angle, and it seems to work very well. And now you just tighten this nut right here where my finger is, and that will put pressure onto the nut, and then it'll pull this out. Just use an adjustable wrench here to get a grip on it, and now just tighten like any other screw. And if you watch carefully, this right here is starting to release. Without a puller, this is pretty much impossible to get off. See, it's starting to release right now. Like that, and it just falls right out. And that's how you get this apart, and now it'll make it easy to put the emergency backing plate on. We recently purchased a brand new emergency brake backing plate from our favorite Willys Jeep store, Ron Fitzpatrick Jeep Parts, and we are not sponsored by them, but it would always be nice to be. And this will be installed on to these 4 bolts right here. First, we'll take the 4 bolts off, put the backing plate on, and then screw these 4 bolts through the backing plate back into the transfer case and torque them up, and the backing plate is installed. Use a 9/16 socket and just unloosen all these bolts. The top left-hand bolt, when the transmission is orientated upside down, is a 3/8, 3/4 inch long bolt, coarse thread. Make sure you know which bolt goes where, because there's actually 3 different lengths of bolts in these 4. The left-hand bottom bolt in our orientation is a 3/8 coarse thread bolt, but it is a 2¼ inch long bolt. These 2 bolts are actually the same, and they are 2½ inch long. They are the same threads and same size. They're just a little bit longer than the other bolt. As you can see, it is a 1/4 inch longer, and this bolt and this bolt are the same length. As you can see, these 2 are 2½ inch long. This one is 2¼ and this one right here is 3/4 in length. Here's just a closer view of what I am working on right now. And there are star washers used when we bought this thing brand new, but we're going to use lock washers as it's a better option to make sure the backing plate doesn't fall off. With all the 4 bolts cleaned up now, got the paint off them and the gasket sealer. Now I'm going to put the lock washers on just to get it all ready to go. I'm going to bring over the backing plate, and you want to make sure you have it orientated with this rectangular hole towards this stud right here, because that will actually hold on the piece that engages the emergency brake. Just place it on like that. In the instance you're having a hard time getting the backing plate for the emergency brake on, I would just get all the paint off around the part that the emergency brake backing plate pushes onto. And then if you have to, use a drill bit and just kind of go around in circles to get this hole right here a little bit bigger. And then it will just slide right on. But first you want to make sure you get all the grease off everything, because this is a brake and brakes do not like grease and dirt. With a standard degreaser, just degrease all the components around here. And do the same step with the backing plate to get all the grease off. Before we install the emergency brake backing plate, it's important that we install the emergency brake lever on first. If you don't install this on first, you can't get it on later. when the emergency brake is installed. But first thing I would do is just re-thread this thing, and it's a 3/8 24, so it's just fine thread. Give it a quick spin here just to make sure it threads nicely. With this thing threaded nicely now we can put the emergency brake lever on, and this is what the emergency brake lever looks like. But first you want to make sure we put some just general purpose grease on this stud right here so it slides better and will operate better when it's connected to the emergency brake cable, which will be attached to this point right here. With some multi-purpose grease, about, I don't know, not too much, but just coat the stud with some grease. And also coat the under part here as well, because that's where the lever will ride on. Just give it a quick bit of grease. Put on the emergency brake lever pointing this direction, so with the longer end pointing in towards the transfer case and with the angle pointing upwards. So you just slide it on to the stud right here, like that. Give it a quick wiggle, get the grease worked in there. Now you'll put a washer on top of this stud right here, but I would just put a little bit of extra grease on this part right here, because this is where it's going to ride on. Not too much, but just a little bit of grease. Then you put a 3/8 washer on, and then a 3/8 fine thread nut threaded on, and it'll just be hand tight for now because we'll have to adjust the tightness and put a cotter pin in. So you have to check back from our video of how we install the cable linkage, and then we'll get this thing tightened down and the cotter pin secured. With the backing plate fully painted in flat black color, which will make this backing plate last longer, and also matches the color of the transmission and transfer case we got going on right now. So you want to make sure you orientate the backing plate with this rectangular hole towards the emergency brake lever, and you just slide it on like that. There's a close review of the emergency brake backing plate, and it's orientated with that rectangular hole facing upwards, and all the holes line up perfectly. Now it's time to install the bolts. The reason why the 2.5-inch bolts are used on the right side in your guys' orientation is because it has to go through the thickness of the emergency brake shoe adjuster. So it has to go through the 1/4-inch thickness. That's why these two bolts are longer than the left-hand bottom one right here. Now, but you have to make sure you install this while you put the backing plate on, because the bolts that hold the backing plate on actually hold on the emergency brake shoe adjuster as well. So orientate it the correct direction. This hole right here in the back is actually used to bolt on to the emergency brake backing plate, and also helps to hold the emergency brake shoe adjuster. So orientate it the correct direction. It'll be this direction, like that. Before you install this bolt, you want to make sure you use a number 2 gasket sealant, because these transmission, and transfer cases are pretty prone to leaking, and these old Jeeps seem to be always leaking. So to try prevent more leakage, we're going to put some gasket sealer on these 4 bolts, and we'll just use this right here, Permatex number 2 Forma gasket. So just load the bolts up with the Permatex gasket sealer. As you know, this stuff is pretty messy, so you're gonna need paper towels and acetone and the whole works here. But it's definitely worth this extra step because there'll be less leaking, hopefully. But no guarantees. make sure you guys use the correct length bolt for the right-hand side that holds the emergency brake shoe adjuster on. So make sure you use the 2.5-inch length bolts, and we'll get started. So with the correct orientation, stick them through the holes and start. The 2.25-inch bolt goes in this left-hand bottom corner. And the 3/4-inch length bolt goes in this top left-hand corner. Use a 9/16 ratchet and socket here, tighten these bolts up. Just snug the bolts up with the socket, and then now we will just torque them up. But when you're torquing them, make sure you torque them kind of like a crisscross pattern, so it puts even pressure onto the emergency brake backing plate. As per the manual specs, it says to use a torque wrench and torque it between 25 and 35 foot-pounds. So I will have it set to 30 foot-pounds to be kind of in the center and just to be safe. See, you torque it until you hear that click noise, and you know that the bolt is set. And there you have it. All the 4 bolts are now properly torqued. A little trick to clean the bolts off with this gasket sealer, use some acetone to get the sealer off like really easy. I'm going to take you guys around to the back of the emergency brake backing plate and make sure to install this one screw right here that goes into the emergency brake shoe adjuster, and it's just a fine thread 3/8 bolt with a lock washer. All you do is just thread it in. Now just thread it in until it is hand tight. There we go, it's pretty hand tight now. And that screw is actually very important because it actually holds on the emergency brake shoe adjuster. And there you guys have it. That is how to install the emergency brake backing plate, have it torqued to specs and all the components inside of it for now. You have to come back for part 2 of the emergency brake to learn how to install the inside components of the emergency brake, which includes the emergency brake shoes and the drum and all the linkage inside. And part 3 will be the cable linkage and the cane that attaches to the dashboard. Thanks for watching and subscribe.